everyone for coming. My name is James Richardson. I'm the program coordinator for LaGuardia's New Media Technology program. And the presentation you're here to see today is preparing for the future, creating a team-wide approach towards digital media programs. The session format is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to do some basic introductions. I'm going to give a brief presentation on the scope of how CUNY is currently addressing digital media and some of the suggestions that I'm putting forth to have a more consolidated approach towards designing these programs. Then I have a number of my colleagues here who were gracious enough to donate their time to have a panel discussion on some of the major issues surrounding CUNY and the issue of digital programs. And then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. Just to give you a little bit of info about me, I've been the program coordinator of New Media Technology and the lead curriculum developer for LaGuardia's New Media program, probably now for about the last 5 years or so. I was the first technical director for the LaGuardia's ePortfolio initiative. I've been in private industry for about 15 years, working in the area of new media and interactive telecommunications, as well as a Rick Perry moment there for that. Digital media as well as telecommunications. And I've been an educator now for about 10 years. The panel that you have in front of you, we have Chris Stein, Associate Professor of Media Arts and Technology from the Borough of Manhattan Community College. We have Michael B. Smith, Assistant Professor and Communications Technology Program Director at York College. Richard Dragan, Assistant Professor of English and Digital Journalism at LaGuardia Community College. It's a new program which is starting up there. And Stephen Breyer, the Senior Academic Technology Officer and ITP Certificate Program Coordinator for the CUNY Graduate Center. I hope I got that right. Good. As I said before, my name is James Richardson, and I'm at LaGuardia Community College. Let's talk a little bit about the digital landscape. There are a number of new media programs within CUNY, and the concept of digital media is something that I'm not sure everyone really firmly understands when we say digital media what we're talking about. Digital media to me is described as the convergence of traditional forms of communication, finance, education, and entertainment with new methods of delivery. The whole concept of new media is not really new in my opinion. It's just that now we have different methods and different means to disseminate information. Let's talk about the concept of digital disruption. The most, in my opinion, most effective thing about digital media is that currently it's disrupting a number of different traditional industries, formats, societies, and so forth. This photo here for me is very indicative of exactly what the power is of digital media. You have everyone's familiar with what's happening with the Arab Spring. We've had social media be kind of the focal point for transforming cultures that previously had been sorry, a little dry. Had previously been very closed, very isolated. And the power of digital media has basically shifted the structure in these environments. The impact of the digital disruption is also, in addition to cultures, has affected the way businesses are interacting. The concept that I have up here, adapt or die, is very applicable. The photo that you have here is a photo of Borders being replaced as it's going out of business with Amazon. Traditional brick and mortar industries have been disrupted. Jobs have been changed. The whole landscape of our society has been evolving. Unfortunately, the rapid evolution of these new media technologies has in many cases progressed faster than society can process. This photo here, or this presentation here, basically shows how old media has been, in a large extent, replaced. We have newspapers being replaced by online newspapers, blogs, and so forth. Magazines being replaced by e-magazines. Television, there's any number of ways in which television now can be gotten directly through the internet. I was upset the other night. I came home late. I was teaching, and my daughter had accidentally reset the VCR and the digital recorder, and basically taped over a show that I wanted to watch. And I was really upset about that. So I actually just jumped online, downloaded the program, and watched it a little bit later. You know, I stopped and think a couple of years back, it would have been impossible to do that. So the way in which we basically get information now is radically shifting. It's, you get it when you need it, or when you want it. Radio has been displaced. I can't remember the last time I got rid of my car, about a year ago. This is the first time in like 20 years I haven't had a car. I can't remember the last time that I've listened to the radio now since I'm not driving, except for podcasts, businesses and so forth. Same thing. This Black Friday, I basically purchased most of my Christmas presents online instead of hitting the stores. So the way in which this digital disruption has basically shifted the landscape has changed the way we interact. There's been a definite disruption on the academic side as well. The constantly shifting technical demand has made it very difficult for us to keep up in terms of curriculum development. It's basically impacting the way traditional disciplines are now trying to figure out how to utilize this new technology. The convergence of all of this is forcing traditional faculty members and digital faculty members to constantly keep upgrading their skills and knowledge. One of the things that's on the horizon, if we're not careful, is that the traditional university system is in danger of being threatened by online and profit universities if we don't come up with consolidated structures to address some of these digital issues. These are just a few of the digital disciplines that are basically, or the traditional disciplines that have been migrated or forced to alter themselves because of digital media. With that said, there's a definite need for CUNY, in my opinion, to develop a consolidated digital strategy. The challenges for some of the colleges and for some of the programs is that it's difficult for some faculty to basically evaluate disciplines that didn't exist up until a couple of years ago. There's very limited guidelines on digital scholarship, how it should be applied, who should review it, who should evaluate it, and the cross-disciplinary nature of new media, since it crosses so many different disciplines, creates sometimes a dilemma in instituting standards that could be applied universally. There are also a number of challenges for digital media faculty. Many times, digital scholarship in the form of multimedia projects is not valued at the same level as the traditional manuscript or the traditional published article. The rapid pace of technical changes have made it difficult for faculty members to kind of stay up to date. We do, but this is in addition to the general work and the general duties that we generally have. And some of the professional development that we have to do in many instances is not taken at the same level or the same consideration. So there are a number of issues facing digital faculty. There's also a number of challenges facing the students in these programs. One of the things that I wanted to discuss here today is I teach at a two-year school. So one of the challenges that many of our two-year students have is once we finish the digital media program, how can we have a seamless transition from the two-year to the senior colleges? The Pathways project that is being implemented right now on a CUNY-wide level has addressed some of those issues, or is attempting to address some of those issues. but I don't think it's effectively, as of yet, dealt with the non-traditional disciplines such as new media and the evolving landscape. Also, the cost of majoring in these digital media programs can be extremely high for our students. They're required to basically have, up-to-date computers. Software suites are extremely expensive. Cameras, web hosting, there's any number of things that they basically have to utilize, and if they're going to be efficient and effective in their field. The main reason I wanted to have this discussion is that there are real problems on the horizon, and currently there's no one really talking about this. So I think one of the first steps that we need to do is address the problems and then see if we can come up with a solution to basically solve or address them. Let's talk about defining a strategy. Establishing a CUNY Digital Media Council. This is the main idea that I'm kind of putting forth. These are some of the programs that we currently have within CUNY. I tried to be as all-inclusive. I might have missed one. I think I missed Kingsborough. But we pretty much have digital media programs in most of the CUNY institutions. However, there's very little to this point formalized communication between the programs. So in terms of when we start talking about things like articulation, transfer, and so forth, there can be issues. Some of the issues kind of arise because digital media programs throughout CUNY are generally housed in sometimes very different departments. I know for LaGuardia, initially we were located in the CIS, the Computer Information Systems Department. After a current restructure, we were migrated over to the Humanities Department and kind of combined with visual arts, with media studies and so forth. I know Chris and Mike, you guys both are in currently your own departments, if I'm not correctly.
I am. I'm not sure. I'm in the Performing and Fine Arts department.
You're in the Performing and Fine Arts.
And that was just, this is like the first full year of being in a separate department.
Okay.
Before that, our program was spread across 3 departments.
3 departments.
Yeah, in the Computer Information Systems, Music and Art, and then Speech and Communication department.
That probably was fairly challenging.
Yes.
And we're an interdisciplinary program. We definitely have courses that are spread across the college. So we have our own courses that are housed in the Performing and Fine Arts, but we have journalism course is an option, English course is an option, fine arts course is an option, and it is tough because you don't get to control necessarily how that curriculum is taught, and you have to interact with the departments.
Same for us actually as well. I mean, for example,
I think it's probably safe to say there's no consistency across CUNY.
Right.
I think we can sort of start from that premise that
you
there's
still have classes in other departments.
and because these things have evolved ad hoc, you have a multiplicity of approaches to sort of what to do with both new digital programs, and then the other piece that I think we need to also say is that there are digital media is transforming traditional academic disciplines in fundamental ways, and those two things are working sometimes in parallel, but sometimes at cross purposes. So I think it's a very complicated, particularly in an institution as big and diverse as CUNY, it's a very complicated issue.
Well, one of the issues that I'm saying is that because there's so much complication and so much separate units basically working on it their own, and when we start to basically do issues of articulation and transfer, it's going to be a madhouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we need to basically, in my opinion, one of the reasons why I'm kind of proposing a digital media council is to at least begin talking about some of those major issues. Also, within some of the digital media programs, you have faculty drawn from multiple disciplines. So you may have professors from the English department, you may have professors from social sciences, professors from computer and information systems, law and journalism. So what happens is then some of the issues that faculty will face or programs will face is, how do you evaluate the scholarship? How do you evaluate the curriculum or the performance of faculty from some so radically different fields? The older methods of assessing this don't really apply, in my opinion, anymore. New ones need to be developed. And if so, I'm hoping that a talk or a council can basically pull a lot of this together.
James, can I ask, do you mean council in the same way in which the already existing discipline councils work? So there's a set of councils across CUNY for the major disciplines. There's a math council.
Right.
There's a math discipline council. There's an English discipline council. Some of them are more active than others. You're proposing the establishment of a sort of more interdisciplinary digital media council.
That's correct.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. I mean, bottom line, that's, you know, the fact that all of these institutions are basically moving at their own pace, developing their own systems, developing their own schedules, it makes it difficult to leverage some of the better economies of scale that CUNY could use to raise the level of instruction throughout the university. The lines of communication need to be more firmly established. The benefits, I believe, from establishing a CUNY-wide digital media council would be as follows. Standards could be put in place for curriculum development. Developing course material in these fields is extremely difficult because of the way the industry is moving. I know for a fact I generally have to update curriculum for LaGuardia probably every 3 to 6 months to check to make sure what's happening. Updating textbooks usually happens probably on a yearly basis. Some of the other standards that could be put in place is, you know, defining what is appropriate professional development for faculty for specific disciplines. Within the digital fields, faculty have to stay up on a number of different technical changes, and we want to make sure that that part of professional development is looked at or evaluated appropriately. We also need to discuss issues of digital scholarship for faculty. Publishing, for example, is the gold standard, and that's fine. But what happens in certain digital fields where there are very few journals, or there's no definitive publishing venues, very few? Do we look at other avenues of what is called digital scholarship, such as, you know, speeches and presentations, writing and securing external grants, teaching student and student advising? One that I believe is a little bit more applicable, and it's also more in line with what happens in the humanities or the arts, is designing digital media art and applications to define how well a professor or how well an organization is instructing. And also university service in terms of designing and building systems and applications that can raise the level of instruction throughout the CUNY-wide university system. Other standards that we need to discuss are for, you know, new disciplines that are currently evolving. For example, I know at LaGuardia we're talking about a digital journalism major. You know, how do we address that type of traditional field that's now migrating into a more of a digital environment? What about some of the fields that have yet to be defined or designed? I stop and think about, you know, 10 years ago, new media was relatively new. There are other new fields that are going to be evolving within the next couple of years because of the way technology is shifting, that we're going to have to basically pull in and address. And currently, right now, there's no system for basically defining how these should be looked at. And in my opinion, the last one is developing standards for responding to articulation and transfer issues. One of the last issues in terms of establishing a CUNY-wide digital media council is to help clarify some of the distinctions within new media. In my opinion, there's two distinct, separate venues. One for new media technologists and the other one for digital humanists. And even though we're all kind of lumped into one general field, the skill sets, the requirements, the tasks that professors in each individual discipline are very different. For example, new media technologists, which is what I kind of consider myself, we're basically instructing others on how to build the next set of multimedia and digital tools. And that's very different than the digital humanities, in my opinion, who are evaluating and looking at how these new media tools are affecting, disrupting, and impacting different aspects of our society. They look at more of the theoretical effects of the technology, while I'm looking at more of the implementation of the technology itself. And how we evaluate professors and how we evaluate programs within these two separate, distinct tracks within digital media needs to be addressed. What I would hope, if we could get this off the ground, what we would do over the next 12 to 24 months. The first one would be, honestly, to just establish the lines of communication. Start talking, basically to start collaborating a little bit more to leverage greater economies of scale. And what I mean by that is knowledge exchange. It's very costly for professors in this field to basically keep up to date. I stop and think about the number of classes that I've taken myself over the past year to stay up on mobile app development, some of the changes with HTML5 and CSS. These are not cheap. And as I said before, greater economies of scale could be helped by a lot of cross-training, collaboration. The fact that, I might have a colleague in another CUNY institution who may be an expert in ActionScript 3 or mobile app development for the iPad or the Android platform. We might be able to collaborate, and because of those collaborations, I would gain greater knowledge, and vice versa. So by sharing and beginning these discussions, I think we would raise the level of faculty knowledge throughout. I'd also like to redesign some of the CUNY digital media programs to basically take a higher profile and raise our profile as a leader in digital media education throughout, not only within the CUNY system, but throughout academia in general. I'd also like to establish digital media conferences to showcase some of the top students within CUNY. Basically to let the world know exactly what we're doing here and what are the level of our students and showing the best and the brightest that we have. I think we need to do greater outreach to some of the local schools to inform them of what is available at CUNY and why CUNY is still a substantial bargain, especially in this economy. We have great instructors, great teachers, great digital programs at affordable prices. I'd also like to the council to basically help us coordinate more with private industry to make sure that we have greater outreach to set up employment opportunities and internships for our students. One of the reasons why students would gravitate and continue to gravitate towards CUNY and towards our digital media programs if we can show positive outcomes to the teaching that we have here. Basically, positive outcomes meaning jobs once they graduate. And that's particularly important in this economic environment. One of the last things I would like to see us do over the next 12 to 24 months is leverage some of the university purchasing power to offer software and hardware discounts to faculty, students, and adjuncts. The cost of the hardware, software to participate in new media is fairly substantial. The software, for example, is even more expensive than the hardware. And when you consider the fact that the software is basically changing and updating and almost yearly, anywhere between 12 to 18 months, if we could offer as a university, much in the same way as NYU, I'm a graduate of NYU, and I don't know, you also, Chris, and one of the things that I've always thought was really cool about being a graduate there was their, the NYU store, where they offer substantial discounts for alumni, faculty, and students. So, you know, you get educational pricing on any number of different things, even better than the traditional academic pricing because NYU leverages their overall buying power. And this would be helpful for numbers of people throughout our programs. In conclusion, before we begin the panel, you know, if we fail to change, there's a growing risk that CUNY will be seen as being behind the times. There are some other schools which are trying to address some of these same issues. I don't know if anyone has heard of the new tech college that Mayor Bloomberg is proposing off of Randall's Island, I believe. Roosevelt Island, excuse me. Not Randall. Roosevelt Island.
Better at Randall's Island, I like that.
You know, we have schools from Stanford, I believe, and a number of other universities that are making a pitch right in our backyard to establish technology and digital media centers. In my opinion, I think we could do much better than that, just because of, if nothing else, just the sheer size of CUNY, the 23 institutions that we basically have. You know, if we also fail to change, just as other industries have found out outside of the academy, if we don't change, we may face those same type of digital disruptions. And if we also fail to change, it's going to be difficult to attract the next generation of digital professionals, students, and faculty. We need to demonstrate our commitment to this discipline. That's the basic presentation I wanted to do to kind of set the landscape, set the tone for the discussion. My name, once again, is James Richardson. You can contact me at my website, jamesrichardson.net. Here's the link also for the LaGuardia New Media Technology Program. I guess we should begin the panel discussion. With that said, guys, I wanted to kick over a hornet's nest because the issue of setting up standards is, I know one is going to be a little bit complex. So, what do you think of the establishment of a digital media council and the role that it could play in, number one, establishing university-wide curricular standards? And I'm going to pose that one to Mike first, because I know that this was something that I believe you particularly had some thoughts on.
Well, I mean, when James pitched to a bunch of us to participate in this presentation to set standards around digital media, I said, ha, good luck with that, getting a bunch of creative types to agree on standards, because I think it's problematic not only because of this shifting technology, but I think there's a lot of tradition in the creative arts, which I think a lot of the digital media is born from, of independent perspectives on how to teach and how to create programs. The programs themselves are extremely diverse, and that's probably what makes them interesting and successful. And you know, in the times of pathways and the times of stresses on budgets and transfer, blah blah blah, I still think it's going to be problematic. I think, but what I was most interested in about this is like, well, if you can't necessarily figure out how to articulate course to course, because I think that's literally a waste of time. I mean, because knowing the articulation process requires signatures from a department chair to a provost and deans in between, and that happens on both campuses. It's insane. It's just, you know, it's really, I find, far too cumbersome. Unless that process changed, and a better woman or man will take on that task. Maybe this council could be part of that. But I think what I'm most interested in, I think what ultimately, I think as a faculty person that is seeing a transfer student to a 4-year school from a 2-year school, what I'm always most interested in is seeing the students work. You know, that's what I always, you know, it's like they're saying, well, I did this class, you know, and I said, oh, that's great. And I said, well, what tools did you use or learn to use? And And they're like, oh, Photoshop, of course, you know, or Final Cut Pro, or something like that, or Dreamweaver, or, you know, and maybe it's tools that include like programming languages. But then I go to the next obvious question and says, well, what did you make? And they're like, well, I have this, we did this project, and it was like kind of documentary, it was kind of like design, or it was kind of a website. And I said, well, where is it? And they're like, I'll have to try to find it. And I think that's the problem in and of itself, is that none of this is being surfaced regularly. All this work, which is rich and amazing. I remember your school, BMCC, hosted this digital media programs conference. And basically, you had a grant, your institution had a grant from one department, I can't recall her name. She's now the chair, I believe.
Right, well, I mean, it was through the Video Arts and Technology program, which is now part of the Media Arts and Technology department.
And it was awesome. So suddenly, I mean, it was what James, I think, was envisioning. Like, everybody got together, and what I enjoyed mostly about it is seeing the students' works from all the different programs.
Honestly, that's where I got to steal the idea. That's exactly where I got the idea from.
Right.
I thought that was one of the singular best conferences that I had gone to in a long while.
But it was just a moment, and that's the sad thing. And so, you know, having spent some time working with the Academic Commons and having worked with this other collaborative community it's a creative community built around, you know, it's actually out of an ed tech department in the University of Mary Washington, called DS-106, and I'm talking about it later today. But to me, these two spaces I've learned so much about in the past years, like, that's the way to kind of maybe tackle this problem, is not worry about the building the defined outcomes and programs that match and articulate. It's like, but if you know, with for example, the Commons in a Box grant, all right, so if you don't know of it, the CUNY Academic Commons, which is the social network that's been kind of built for and by faculty, they just received this grant to build a prototype of a social network in a box, and you can install it. And they're working with the MLA, and they're funded by Sloan, and it's amazing. But soon after that, they're going to say, like, hey, are you using it? And I said, wow. And, you know, and the Commons team was like, well, that'd be great if I could use it on my campus for my school. That's one thing. But I was like, well, imagine if we use it as for a set of disciplinary activities, and it just kind of sat, you know, above and around these communities, and you can connect to it through your institution or through the Academic Commons, and your students could get on and say you're conducting a digital media course in there, if you are, or your students are just making stuff and they're feeding things based on tags, like simple tags like motion graphics or ActionScript or XML, and so you could start to see these things based on content, and the students could engage each other across that space. That would, to me, be probably an exciting opportunity to find ways for the programs to interact just by having the students engage one another with their work, and the faculty as well over time. I think that would be really, really fabulous. Because I worked on program development in CUNY, and it's a beast, articulation agreements. I'm not saying they're not valuable, they truly are, but in our discipline, particularly, as soon as you like get the final signature,
It
the
changes.
technology's changed, the courses have changed, it's insane. It's really, really hard.
What about establishing then just the kind of like basic learning outcomes then? Or, you know, instead of like being very specific about it, you know, like, you know, to a certain extent, that's kind of what's happening with Pathways. They're talking about they want so many credits of English, they're talking about so many, you know, areas of, you know, math and, you know, critical reasoning and thinking. Are there generic technical or digital media outcomes that we could define that might help push that discussion along?
I don't know. Name one.
I mean, like say for example, you know, understanding, you know, basic programming, or understanding, you know, basic issues around design or layout. Whether they be, you know.
I mean,
We've got an audience member
Yes,
that has to say something.
Yeah, the University of Texas in their art program, in their foundations course, which is the first 4 semesters, it was always the traditional intro to drawing, 2D design, 3D design. Now they have 4D design. And 4D design, what's that? It's Photoshop, or image processing, it's video, it's web design, it's these things. So, and that's part of their foundation classes. So they will establish that, and, you know, you speak of pathways. You can start that, and everybody would have the same sort of vocabulary with which to use it in more advanced classes.
I think that's one of the the big questions on it too. I think it's possible to have certain standards around certain areas, maybe web design, basic design standards, some programming things. Where it's more difficult is then how is that then applied to the courses, or what a particular program thinks is important, right? Because one program might say we want to do web design, that's the base. Another one, much more graphic design focused or programming focused, or whatever it is. And I think
Aren't
that's
these distinct skills though? I mean, I know that you want to have someone learn lots of different things, but isn't that whole team concept that we're thinking about when it comes to designing a website?
Well, and
you
this
actually
is
just work where you know every single piece of it, yes, but you also only work in one specific area. So those are the ways that students branch out rather than start out.
right. Well, I think that's the question. Would we be better off, sort of as you're suggesting, having everyone start out the same and then allow them to branch out later, and give up some of our own notions of how they should actually start out individually on the campus?
See, I want to make a sort of radical counter proposal to this, just as a kind of devil's advocate, because I come from the digital humanities side. I come out of history, and one of the advantages of having been doing this at CUNY for 30 years is I've seen all this multiple times. This is a little bit like Groundhogs Day for me, and it's the dream I can't wake up from, or can, I'm not sure. The problem in part is the council idea is a great idea, but I would say we sort of have that already in the form of the Committee on Academic Technology. Now, it does conflate that. For those of you who don't know, is because it's got the word academic in it instead of administrative. It is largely, though not entirely, comprised of faculty and administrators who work directly, and there are a bunch of people on the CUNY Academic Technology Committee who are here in the room today, and I think we could start that conversation there. I don't feel like the committees we have preclude the possibility of having this conversation, but having said that, the one thing I would say is I've looked and worked with, I've had the advantage, now I'm a faculty member, I used to be a project director, and then I was an administrator at the Graduate Center and VP for Information Technology, so I've sort of been on all the various sides on this thing. The councils are a great idea, but in principle they're great, but in practice they don't work so well across CUNY. There are many discipline councils. Some of them are completely moribund and others are quite active, and so creating a council is no guarantee that it's going to be able to do anything. That's my one concern. So rather than spend the time building another institution, I think digital media programs like you're all involved in have the distinct advantage of being, in some ways, hived off and outside the main context of what goes on in the academy. At a place like the Graduate Center, which is, as you know, doctoral education, the struggle for people like me is we're on the outside trying to get traditional academics to sort of pay any attention to any of this. They won't pay attention to digital media as digital media. They'll only pay attention to it if it's got some academic or intellectual patina to it. So when I created the Interactive Technology and Pedagogy Certificate Program, I had to really emphasize that it wasn't a tech training thing, because a lot of people wanted it only to be that it had sort of serious academic content. And the problem is the digital humanists are struggling for recognition in their respective academic fields. There isn't a digital humanities program or department quite yet. In many places, what you have is a lot of people in programs like English or history or social science programs who are interested in using digital technology. So you're squaring a difficult circle here. You've got, as you correctly note, James, you've got digital media people, many people on this panel, and then you've got digital humanists, for lack of a better word, which includes social scientists as well, and they're not necessarily marching to the same drummer, though they face many of the same issues. So my feeling is you could propose the council, and the council could be a kind of offshoot, but I wouldn't assume that it's going to have any real power within the CUNY structure. Maybe Dick can clarify this, but my sense is that the academic discipline councils really report through the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. It is an academic affairs function of the central office. It does not have a separate, a different standing. And I'm not sure that's the way we want to go if you're talking about a traditional council within the CUNY structure.
I mean, original reason that I came up with this concept of a digital media council was because of the work that we've done on the CAP committee.
Right.
Getting a number of people inside of the same room to discuss these major issues, people who are in a position to affect these changes. The reason why I want this, for lack of a better idea, is, you know, I'm not familiar with every individual program coordinator and person in all of these digital media programs throughout CUNY. So if a student comes to me and says, you know, if I'm looking for an excellent program in multimedia programming, the only reason that I know, well, you know, there's schools like, you know, BMCC or, you know, programs over at York is because I physically know you guys. And just understanding and making those type of institutional-wide connections can go a long way to informing students and also creating opportunities for collaborations, from everything from grants to publishing to any number of things for faculty members. We're not talking. I mean, I understand what you're saying in terms of like digital media councils or councils in general sometimes not being effective, and I'm totally for other ideas. The reason I kind of tossed this out, this is a starting point. And if we don't start these discussions, at least nothing's really gonna happen.
So what's wrong with having a subcommittee or CAT for this purpose? Because they have an e-portfolio committee where somebody, you know, somebody on the committee has now pulled together people who are not on the CAT but are across CUNY working on e-portfolios. So it could certainly be a subcommittee of that, where now you invite people from all of the campuses. We have this committee on academic technology, there's a subcommittee on digital media. And then about your software issue, you have some clout, I think, in that committee to report to IT,
Right.
say, you know, we have this CUNY e-mall, you can get a lot of stuff for cheap on there, but what about and push it from that committee, which is also reporting to the executive vice chancellor.
And, you know, and I'm come here as a journalist and launching a new program. We have a journalism discipline council now, and that's been very helpful just to talk to what people are doing. And we don't maybe have the same problems as journalists, journalism professors, but we're struggling for recognition too. And so we're also one of the most disrupted industries ever, and we have to deal with that. And one of the goals for launching a new journalism option in the liberal arts, not quite a new major, but it's a concentration in journalism in LaGuardia, is to make sure students know that we'll be dealing with online journalism. But it's been very helpful to talk to other people who are a little bit on the outside of their respective institutions. That's been a great thing. So just getting a conversation started, it's going to lead to smoother articulation agreements, and also telling students of what's available. And it also gives you a voice, I think, as a particular discipline, and you understand what people are up against too. And so it's been very supportive as well for us.
The council that you're talking about is currently just within LaGuardia?
No, it's throughout the, we meet it's about every month. We just sort of started going to this, but it's,
Okay.
We get the journalism folks from different CUNY institutions, and, some are, lifetime lecturers, some are full professors. Where my institution, it turns out that people with masters in journalism can't really be promoted, so we're recruiting new faculty now, and that's kind of a problem. So one of the things we need to do is work on that and tell people, by the way, people at Brooklyn are full professors with a master's in journalism. What's wrong? What's so special about LaGuardia? So to have that conversation, to sort of set standards with promotion and scholarship, that's important. We need to have that. That's helping us out. It's probably a midterm goal. It'll probably take a few years to straighten things out with us, but we can see there's hope and there's a direction for this.
Can I get back to some of the curriculum standards and so forth, just briefly? Something that kind of came up that Michael had mentioned is the concept of students kind of losing their work, of not having kind of like living, ongoing portfolios.
I think there's it's like valuing their work.
I mean, how does that kind of, one of the reasons I initially started with the e-portfolio initiative was largely because out of the concept of digital media, the portfolio is like key. It's your kind of digital resume. So for me, it wasn't that big of a jump to kind of grasp onto that. You know, do we need to basically, you know, have a better concept? Because I know the way when we restructured the program at LaGuardia, one of the very things that we did was the capstone course within the major was basically a portfolio redesign class. So before students graduated, one of the things that they have to do is redesign their final professional portfolio to help them at least transfer, find external work, or work as a freelancer. The portfolio, without that, they're kind of lost, and that's kind of disconcerting that we have students, and I have students who do the same thing, where like they've gone through a lot of different classes, and you know, you ask them, well, you know, when they get to the capstone course and they're scrounging around to try to find their best stuff, you know.
I mean, that's something, we have a similar course. It's a 1-credit class, capstone class, and it precedes their internship and their final project, and it's a prep course to build portfolio, to prepare a final project proposal, to get together a resume, to, you know, it's simple. It meets every other week before. It's one of my favorite classes because it's actually pretty mellow. It's not like I have to teach any new skills. I'm like, just let's talk about what you want to be, blah, blah, blah. And so we were doing it in WordPress, on our local WordPress, and that was fine. But there were all these students that, like you said, don't have their stuff. So, you know, well, there were these other intro courses or mid-level courses where we're like, well, get them using WordPress. And now it's gotten to this point where now in our intro course, our intro production course, it's not just use our platform. We now say you're not allowed to use our platform. You have to go and get a commercial web hosting account. All right, and you have to use the cPanel and install WordPress and start blogging your stuff, and we're going to aggregate it to like a college space.
I think the only issue with that is upkeep. I mean, I go back 10 years with the projects I did when I was in school, and over the years they still feel relevant in terms of the content, but they got lost because they were on my school's server.
But that's why you get the commercial hosting
and they
account.
lost a lot of stuff one year. Yeah, it's literally just lost most of my work that was on the web. So students asking them to be responsible for maintaining a website is costly, and it's fraught with error. Like if you want to introduce error,
Well, I'll just, I mean, let me, like the number one, it's like, it's not costly. It's $60 a year.
That could be a lot. I mean, that could be a lot to.
I'm telling you, like, if we are in a discipline. You're talking about costs,
Right.
All right, thousands of dollars in costs of computers and software.
absolutely.
$60 a year, you know, it can be less. It can, you know, is not a lot. And the fact that you're focusing on, I mean, I recognize it's hard, but that's what I'm saying is the course is built around building that skill, not just doing
What's
work.
wrong with just using, you suggested this already, just the e-portfolios?
Because it's not their space. It's their stuff. It's their space. You want them to control it.
Well, I would think also from a digital media perspective, in your final professional portfolio, you want it to be a reflection of your design ethic and standards. And a lot of e-portfolio systems don't allow for that. Yes.
I maintain my own web space, for example, but I wanted to just ask, what's wrong with just porting your content into WordPress.com or something where you don't have to pay the maintain?
Sure. That works
Totally
too.
fine.
I mean, that's fine as well.
Sure.
I think the thing is like, your own space, like WordPress.com has a very limited set of tools, ultimately. You know, you're not allowed to install plugins.
You're not allowed to basically customize the design significantly.
Significant. So, I mean,
Brand.
but it's still fine. I'm-
Control can then take that. as-
exactly. I'm with you there. You know, I mean, this particular course is like asking you to do it. I mean, we're a digital media program. I have really no problem saying that that's a fundamental, because it's about generating a digital identity too. It's not just like saying, hey, this is where my stuff is. It's like, this is the thing you have to do is like, put your work out there, start to make it relationships and share and interact, and because it's as much as about that, you know, as it is like, this is my stuff. Because I think that's the difference. I'm not talking about just a professional portfolio. This is a space to communicate your work in progress, along with showcase your best stuff.
Does it's different audiences too though, but when we're talking about e-portfolio, it's helpful for, I mean, we use it in different disciplines at LaGuardia. We're very big on e-portfolio, and I'm against platforms because I like doing it myself too, and I used to test a lot of enterprise software for PC Magazine. I used to set up all kinds of servers and stuff. So I'm kind of a strange fish here because I'm, an English professor, but I'm also at this technology side. But I think what we find with students is it's helpful when they transfer somewhere else. Now with CUNY, it's maybe there can be difficulties there, but certainly showing your work and showing which classes you've taken, it's very easy for them to get that in, and it really does help them transfer without an articulation being whatever. I mean, they can see just what they've done.
To go back to what you were saying though, some of the e-portfolio stuff, we're looking like building the portfolio within the e-portfolio systems, because I went through the selection process at the beginning and at the recent one that we just basically migrated to education. Customizing or using that solely as the portfolio is not something that's particularly aesthetically pleasing to a digital media person, hands down. I can't disagree with that. However, using it as a repository to store projects, information that you've done over time, I think is great. Because the issue that I have with having the students maintain their own websites, that's something I tell them to do, but in reality, especially with the kind of student body that we have at LaGuardia, some are, recent immigrants to the country, some, have financial issues. In terms of maintaining even that $60 a year, which is, most of us in the room look at that and kind of laugh, it can be a struggle. It can be a struggle and
it's a commitment, but I mean, it's.
And all I'm saying is, like, imagine you have your digital portfolio, the work that you've basically created, and you place it on your own web server, okay? Let's say this year you're great, next year you're great, you come into hard times a year or two down the line, and that's one of the things that has to go. And I have a student.
You can archive it.
You gotta archive.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is not rocket science here.
But it seems to be a major problem. When I was the vice president of IT at the Grad Center, we have a U drive where students and faculty store their academic work, and we had, not surprising, sometimes it happens, the U drive crashed, and I got besieged by students, doctoral students, who were saying, I have my dissertation on there, I've got to defend my dissertation, and I can't get access to it. And I would say, not that I wasn't sympathetic or that we took responsibility, you're telling me you didn't archive on some external media your dissertation, you trusted it to an external drive that you had no control over? I mean, but I think that is a problem. I mean, given how cheap storage is, you put it on a flash drive, put it on an external drive.
It is what I just am waking up to, all right, is this is the core skill, is to awaken students to be creative,
right,
and find ways to be creative. The intro course happens to be what we call it's a digital storytelling course. So it's not, I don't even teach them tools. I tell you, who here doesn't have a digital camera? And they all just sit there like this, because they all have them. I could say, yes, photography class, you're gonna learn f-stops, exposure, blah, 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 composition. I don't bother with that, because there's these more problematic issues. Like, yes, I can give you the expensive tools for the semester and all that stuff, and then you just toss all your stuff in the can, or you don't reflect on it and talk about how you've been using it, or you don't connect with anybody. You just made it it's the transactional stuff, right? You made it for your professor, they kind of made it great. And in the fine arts, critique's part of it. I mean, I come from fine arts, and so critique is in the tradition of fine arts, and portfolio is in the tradition of fine arts. These aren't big leaps, but the idea is, the digital media says you have this opportunity. And it's really easy. I mean, I used to try to teach faculty Dreamweaver to do their faculty portfolios. That was psychotic, I mean, really
On their part or your part?
I know both. I was okay, I'm gonna make this as easy as possible. I'm gonna build this template, and it was stupid. It really was. It lasted microseconds ultimately. And WordPress is gonna maybe be, I don't know, not forever, but it's so much easier now. I mean, that's the thing, is it's something that, you know, and it blew my mind how many ways the students found to screw up the basics of getting a web hosting account and their URL, and like it blew my mind. Like they found innumerable ways to make mistakes, whether it was like domain pointing or, you know, reserving a URL they don't own, you know, thinking they've reserved it. You know, really crazy stuff, but it was awesome because those are the things that you want them to get out of the way in the beginning.
But let me back up then. Then the fact that we're having students with those particular issues, why isn't CUNY on a larger scale have some type of introductory digital media course at all of the schools? And I mean by, like, when we looked at the stuff for pathways, we basically saw that there was information set aside for, you know, English, for math and sciences, but there was really nothing for pure technology. And more of our world is being affected by it. The fact that students don't know when they upload something where it goes sometimes, that creeps me out. It's like, you know, it's stored, it's in the cloud. It's like, but they don't understand all of the other major issues, basic skills for digital media.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, we've probably been teaching a long time, and you know, basic students knew what HTML was. My students have no idea how Facebook works. You know, they have no idea. They have no idea what goes into a text message. I thought, you know, I teach a research paper class. I said, you should research perhaps, you know, how a text message works, because you know, there's the carrier, there's the servers. I mean, it's an amazing thing to understand it. They have no idea. It's magic. And I would like to, you know, when we say digital literacy or technical literacy, we have that in all our competencies of the writing, for instance. You know, it's just basically doing a Google search, but I would like people to think about how it works.
Well, again, not wanting to be the wet blanket, but, you know, given the reception of the Pathways proposal by the University Faculty Senate, all I can say is good luck with trying to get digital media, you know, into that particular process. It totally belongs there.
Has a little more of it.
Yeah, and I would say rather than trying to do it university-wide, the smarter strategy would be to do it campus by campus.
I mean, at least the word media is somewhere in that proposal. I mean, I did see it the one time, but you had a.
Well, I just wanted to say, I saw the latest pathway study last night, and lo and behold, surprised, they've added a fifth area suddenly, which is something like science and technology and life or something.
Something like that.
There's a technological category, fifth one that's been added. They took credits away from the English, math area and gave you now, instead of 15, they gave you 18, 6 courses, and gave you less life science and less English. So,
I mean,
so you have a place to put this.
I mean, but you know, just the experience that you had, like teaching other faculty members basic digital media skills like Dreamweaver, and so, I've had that exact. When you were saying that, I got the chills because I've had that exact same experience.
But now I'd say how it's different now. When I have taught faculty to use WordPress, it's so much easier. The dashboard is a little like interface shock, like any new interface in digital media is. But you just point to like, this is where you make a post, this is where you make a page, and you're like, oh, I'm building a website. And there's the sequential part, which is the blogging, and then there's the static part, which is the pages. And you know, and I think people are more and more savvy about simple things like embedding and things like that. But just the notion of here's how you upload an image if you want to, and then boop, it pops up. I mean, it was a heck of a lot easier experience than Dreamweaver, which is like, you know, it's not like yes, technically has the what you see is what you get, like ideal, but the reality is it's a professional's tool. You know, here's how you configure your FTP, like, you know, like that's what, you know, and then you must have a folder in this place on your, like, you know, like folders and where they are, you know, as you said, with students, faculty are no different. This, like it says, it's up there, you know, it's a site. You're just making pages now. You don't have to think about those things unless you get in, drill down into the hardcore types that are wishing to change PHP files or wishing to change the CSS and all that kind of cool stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
We made the same leap from Dreamweaver to WordPress and open source When we, in the ITP program over the 10 years, we were teaching students how to build web pages,
Right.
and it was done in the very
Right.
sort of traditional way with Dreamweaver. We actually started, because that's all we had for a while, with Microsoft, whatever that stupid
Front
program.
Page,
Thank you, Front
yeah.
Page. I blocked it from my mind. Front Page is one of the great abominations in
Yes.
programming.
Purple,
But
blue,
then
yellow.
it's moved, Chris taught in the program last semester, it's moved dramatically toward open source, and I would, you know, and I think that's been a huge change and a very positive one in terms of what students, and what I find interesting about this conversation is we're at two ends of the process, and we've got, you know, community college, you know, introductory sort of student issues, and then I'm trying to work at the other end, training faculty to be PhDs to sort of bring digital media and digital ideas into their academic teaching and their academic discipline. I'm a little worried about the middle, which would be our senior colleges. Now, I know there are some things going on in senior colleges in this area that's very positive, but I think this is going to take a long time to gestate, it feels to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like whatever we can do to get the conversation started is good, and I think the idea of doing it inside CAT, at least to start with, to kick the idea off, makes some sense, because that is a largely faculty-controlled operation, and I think that's where this needs to be. This cannot be a top-down operation. It's gotta come up from the faculty, and the faculty are, in some ways, our dear colleagues are going to be the most resistant to these kind of changes, and people who are threatened by the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be a struggle to get you all the status that you really deserve within the university structure. You're pushing from the outside to get something, you know, established, and it's not an easy thing. Universities, as we all know, are very resistant to change.
But, I mean, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think we can all agree that like starting a conversation in some somewhat formal way is a good idea. You know, that like being able to talk to each other and meet regularly and have that is probably a beginning of whatever else can happen. I also know it's difficult to do standards, but I feel like we're also in an industry that is so based on standards and openness, right? It's like without HTML and CSS and other standards like that, we wouldn't be able to do whatever it is we're doing. So it feels like we also should be able to find some kind of underpinning that cuts across the programs that we can use in some way to help these agreements. I mean, we just finished an articulation agreement with City Tech. And I agree with you from that experience that
How long did it take?
about a year. What we found from that is that one-to-one class articulation is basically impossible.
Yeah.
And what we ended up with was saying, okay, our students are going to take these 60 credits, and we need to agree on which 60 credits they need to take after they get to your school. And that ended up being a much easier route for an articulation
Smart.
agreement, because it was basically they just had to make a decision about, okay, you know, even if these classes aren't exactly the same, they're learning in these kind of things, so here's what else we want them to learn once they get to our school.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible irony within CUNY. When I was still an administrator, I really did come to understand it was easier to get students from LaGuardia articulated with Brown than it was with Queens College.
Right.
And that, I mean, that irony, you know, it just blows your mind, but I don't think that's really fundamentally changed. And so the idea of doing it campus to campus, faculty to faculty, and administration to administration makes a lot of sense.
And that's a great idea, but it instantly gets blown up if they don't get the 60 credits.
Right.
And it just reverts
Well,
to
and part
course to
of
course.
what happened
You know, and that's the
was
thing that sucks about that
as
stuff.
faculty, you know, when you're doing articulation, I think you have to give up a little bit of sense of control. Like the sense that we're going to control all the courses that they take. And this is the other reason I think that Pathways is meeting with such resistance, because Pathways is also saying, you don't have control over these 30 credits that students take. This is the area they get to do what they want. And it's a difficult thing, I think, you know, coming from a two-year school as well, we feel much more possessive of those 60 credits, because that's all they get. We can't say, all right, take 30 credits of something, and then we'll figure out in the next 3 or 4 years, you know, what else you're going to take. But there is something, I think, valuable to, like, letting that go a little bit and realizing, like, what's the overriding principle? What are we doing here? Because I think you're right that the fact that our students can't articulate across our programs in our schools is a big issue, and that's one of the other reasons I came here. And I think starting the dialogue is a big part of that. But that's one, and obviously there's the other side which we haven't talked yet much about, which is faculty, what you've talked about, promotion, recognizing work and all that stuff, and that's another thing that I think a dialogue can help address. But the student articulation and transfers is also, I think, a big issue that is not easy to tackle.
I mean, just to get back on, just real quick on the tenure, promotion and so forth. A lot of times, many of our colleagues who are on these P&B committees, they make their very best effort to understand our disciplines. But largely, in previous years, what happens is that that's why I think they gravitated so much toward the printed manuscript. Largely because if it's printed at another institute by an effective journal, it's been assessed by leaders in that particular field as being worthy. But what happens with disciplines that are emerging, that are new, that those journals don't exist? How do those faculty members then evaluate the scholarship? And that can be an issue, particularly if they don't have the technical background or the artistic background to evaluate it.
I think more to your point too, I think the overriding thing is this idea of sort of a third-party stamp of approval. Right? That with a peer-reviewed publication, it says, okay, someone outside of our university who's not biased in any way has said this is worthy in some regard, and which that's probably partly, and I just went a tough thing to get in certain cases.
But that's one of the reasons I propose this kind of council or larger body, so that you get people from multiple universities within CUNY to say, this is valuable work that may, someone at BMCC or the committees there might not understand it, but you might have someone at another institution say, well, wait a minute, no, we're digital media people. This is valuable work, and here's the reason why.
I think that's where I think the conversation.
I think it's got to go past beyond CUNY. I think the way to make this happen is accepting the notion that traditional academic publication doesn't exist in the same way in digital media. It's to reach out to faculty at other institutions outside of CUNY. I do this all the time now as a senior faculty member. I'm asked to evaluate that kind of work from people around the country who write to me and say, will you look at whatever? And I think it's our obligation, those of us who have the ability to cross these boundaries, to assist younger faculty. I have a daughter who's an associate professor, so I know exactly what this process is like. And those of us who are in the field need to take some larger responsibility until we have those.
In the field, we sort of have some.
I think we have to, but I think it would be one of the advantages of talking would be how to build those networks out.
I mean, a good example is one of my colleagues, Jody Culkin, wrote I worked early with her on sort of like comics on how to teach things. So we had done one on how to count in binary. So she did one on how to use the Arduino chip. So for those who don't know, it's basically an open source little hardware chip to do it. And she published this, and then it got picked up by Boing Boing and someone else. And she was getting like 100,000 hits a week.
Right.
Wow.
Something on it. So this is like something that like people in the community just love. It's been translated now into different languages. And the question on that would be, okay, now how do you take that and present it to the P&B committee?
Yes.
And say, because obviously for most of us we can say that's probably more valuable than some article that I wrote that 5 people read in an obscure journal. But the difficulty is like, well, how do we prove that and show that?
This is hard.
Same thing
this
with
is hard in
blogging.
journalism too, to say, look, I've got this article online, or even on my blog, I've got a lot of hits. Does that count? And it doesn't count. Journalism doesn't count. With our TV committee, you have to do something else. It doesn't work on ours.
Yeah, I think it can still work though. If you, as Steve was saying, you just have to find the external reviewer to authenticate it. And that's one of the things I think which is why like being out in the open helps. It's like if you're engaging your peers and your peers say you rock, and then they can write a more formal letter that's, dear provost, he rocks, or
But we probably needs 800 or 900 words to say he rocks.
Exactly. And they'll add the presented here, understand that these communities function this way, etc. I think that's not that hard to do necessarily. If you're out there, that's the thing. It's like encouraging. You got to get yourself out there as well as the students, and then the provost and B&B will figure out that that's part of it.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you, gentlemen, for participating. This is, for me, it's been enlightening. And I just want to say thank you for all the participants here. Hopefully this will spark a larger ongoing discussion. And, you know, I think I'm going to take your suggestion and see if we can push that through the subcommittee on CAT. So.
And I think we'll have to talk too, because my chair in our department has been thinking about putting together another meeting similar to the one that we've had a long past at BNCC,
Yeah.
towards the idea of a discipline council. So I think we can probably merge these, you know, energy streams going together.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you.
Work.
Yeah, I'm here for the day. I got 2 more periods.